It's been 3 years since our divorce was finalized. Beth and I had been married for almost 18 years before our separation. We were high school sweethearts and married shortly after graduation. At that time, we had no other lovers but each other. That makes a lot of sense. It's a really good thing love outweighs sex any day of the week. Of course, you don't realize this until it's too late. We led probably the kind of life that could be called a good life. We had 4 children, Amy, Brad, Carla, and Daryl. We called them the kids alphabetically. After Daryl was born, I had a vasectomy. I didn't need the whole alphabet. Amy and Brad are now in college, and Carla and Daryl still live with Beth, my ex-wife. What happened? What went wrong? We seemed like a happy family. We were good parents and supported everything our children did. Like most young couples, we struggled to make ends meet. I worked in a factory, and Beth started working at the local Wall Asterisk Mart as soon as the 2 older children went to school. The younger kids started daycare when one of us wasn't home to watch them. It wasn't the best job, but that's the way things are in today's society. I often wonder how my parents and grandparents managed everything when women did not work. I don't know who to blame, society or materialism. We wanted a lot of things, and we wanted them too fast. Our love life started out fine, as it probably does for most young people. We did it all the time, day and night. As the children were born, we did it less and less. That's probably how it is in most families. We just didn't have the time, or so we thought. In hindsight, the problem was ourselves. We started taking each other for granted. Our love life became a hurry-up-and-get-it-done affair. We were climaxing, but it wasn't what it used to be, sweat and I love you so much. In a way, I guess it became boring, but only because we weren't putting love into it. Eventually, I was promoted to supervisor, and our financial situation became much better. As the kids got older, we were able to go out occasionally. Dinner and a movie were nice. It put some sparkle back into our somewhat dull relationship. I think all marriages go through this. You love each other but take each other for granted. Beth came home one day and said she wanted to go out with the other girls from work. I didn't see any problem with that since our children were old enough to take care of themselves. This happened about 4 years ago. Beth dressed in slacks and a blouse. She looked pretty good. Like many women, she was always worried about her weight, but she thought she always looked good at any weight. When she got home, I asked her if she had a good time. She told me that she had and about some of the other girls. I have nothing against Wall Asterisk Mart, but many of the women who worked there were divorced and separated. That didn't strike me as the type of person Beth should be having fun with. I told her that, and she got mad at me for belittling her friends. I didn't do anything like that. I told her it's just that these women will be looking for men, and you'll be with them. She looked at me a little confused. We'd been together for 18 years, I knew all her moods. I knew I'd hit a nerve. Well, have you danced with any of the men? I asked. She delayed answering but then said, I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, I danced with a couple of guys, and that's about it. I knew a little more had happened, but I didn't bring it up. She told me that she and her friends were going to get together once a month. I didn't really like that, but what could I say? We'll just have to wait and see. The next month, she wore a skirt and tights. I watched her get dressed. She didn't say anything to me. I told her I would wait for her upstairs. When she walked in, it was past midnight. She looked at me and went to her room to change. As she headed for the bedroom, I asked her, You were wearing pantyhose when you left. Where are they? It was hot, so I took them off, is all, she said. Beth, this is getting out of hand. We need to talk, I said. She asked me to leave the room so she could undress. I told her that she had been undressing in front of me for 18 years, and I wanted to know what was so special about this night. I walked over to her and took her hand. It was something I had never done before. Please don't, Jerry. I'm begging you, please don't, she said. Well, I guess that answers the question of why there are no tights, doesn't it? I remarked. I'm sorry, Jerry. It just happened. I was drinking at this party, and Joe kept telling me how beautiful I was, and then he kissed me and started touching me. I've never been with anyone but you, Jerry. Girls kept telling me how good Joe was, and I let it happen. You've had more than one man, haven't you? I asked when Joe took me. I was lying on the bed, and then a couple of other guys came in and took advantage of me too. They didn't take you, you let them all have you. Doesn't our marriage mean anything to you? Didn't you at least think of me or the children, Jerry? I'm sorry, it wasn't love like you and me, it was the best sex ever, and I loved it. Barb, one of the other girls, is married, and she told me that she and her husband like to change. I don't want to lose you, Jerry. Please go with me once and try it, she begged. I needed to think. My thoughts were scattering in different directions. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore. My mind didn't understand what had just happened. I told her we could talk the next day. That night I would sleep on the couch. In the morning, after the kids were gone, I got dressed and went to work. Beth was still asleep after a hard night's sleep. I couldn't take my mind off work, so I took the day off. I walked over to where Beth was working and approached her. She smiled at me. She was the cashier that day, and her friend Barb was sitting at the next register. I read the name on her name tag. Honey, why aren't you at work? Her friend Barb kept her eyes on me. I'm going to see Jeff, our lawyer, today. I'm going to get a divorce. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Beth yelling at me to wait. She had a customer at the register and didn't know what to do. She must have been in a panic. I didn't wait, briskly walked out the door, got in my truck, and drove off. I immediately went to the house and packed up almost all of my clothes. I put everything in boxes and loaded them into the truck. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew where I didn't want to be. I left a note for my kids. I told them that their mother and I were divorcing and she could explain everything to them. I'd really like to know how she was going to explain it, probably going to make it all my fault. She was good at blaming me for everything. I ended up going to my parents' house. They were in their 60s and had been married for over 40 years. I told them that Beth and I were separating and would probably divorce. I know it hurt them because they really liked Beth, and it was probably a shock. I told them I needed a place to stay, and they offered me a whole basement. It had been completely remodeled, and there was a nice bedroom and even a small kitchen and living room. They said I could stay there as long as I needed. They didn't use the basement anymore. They didn't like the stairs. About 2 years ago, they moved the washer and dryer upstairs after Mom had her hip replaced. I may get a little confused telling you this story. I have so much to tell you. I know you want to know about Beth and what the children thought and what the lawyer and a few other people said. I told Mom and Dad that Beth wanted more freedom. It was hard to explain that she wanted to have fun with other people. I didn't want to tell my parents that. I just told them that we felt differently about a number of things and didn't think we could come to an agreement. They weren't happy with that explanation, but it was all I could tell them at this point. I did get to Jeff, our attorney, and he told me that Beth had already called twice. I asked him who he would represent, me or her. She doesn't want a divorce, Jerry. She thinks you can work things out, Jeff replied. Answer my question, Jeff. Are you her lawyer or mine? I asked again. I'm hers, Jerry. She called me first, and I agreed to the case. I'm sorry. If you had called me, I would have been yours. Please talk to her, Jerry. You are both my friends, and I hate to see you both in divorce court, he said. Did she tell you why I left, Jeff? Why I want a divorce? I asked. She said you two had a fight because she went out on a date. She got drunk and cheated on you, he replied. Truth time, Jeff. She went on a date after I told her I had a bad feeling about it. She had fun with 3 men and then asked me if I wanted to switch with her friends. So much for the occasion, Jeff. I'm going to meet Sally Black. We both know she's the best in the business. I'll have her give you a call as soon as we work out a plan. Thanks for everything, Jeff. I turned around and walked out. Sally was the best divorce attorney in the state. She was as intransigent as the rest of them. I knew several men who had gone up against her, and they had all been brought out in the open. I called Sally, and she set up an appointment for me the next day. She asked me not to talk to Beth until our meeting. I asked her about the kids, and she told me to have the parents call them and tell them we would talk in the next couple of days. My parents called the kids and talked to Amy, our oldest. They told Amy that I would call them and talk to them in the next few days. They said that if any of the kids had an emergency, have them call them. They also said that I would be staying at their house. About 2 hours later, Beth called home. She told my dad that she needed to talk to me. I shook my head, refusing, and my father said that my lawyer had forbidden me from talking to her that day. I would call her after I met with my lawyer. I heard Dad say to Beth, "Beth, I don't know what happened between you two, but you must have hurt Jerry terribly. I've never seen him like that." He talked some more and hung up. He looked at me and said, "Beth said to tell you that she loves you and she shouldn't do that to your family." I was furious. I knew she was going to take it out on me and make it my fault. Mom wasn't in the room, so I told my dad the truth. I asked him not to tell Mom because it would crush her. She loved Beth. When he left the room, he had tears in his eyes. My father was a rather sentimental man. The next day, I went to work. The plant didn't allow me to take personal calls except for emergencies. I told the manager that I had filed for divorce and made sure that no calls from Beth were forwarded as emergencies. I was glad to be working. It helped me focus on something other than Beth. I met up with Sally after work. She was a beautiful lady but mostly businesslike. "Jerry, what do you want to have happen here?" she asked. "Wow, I guess I'm not quite sure. You see, I love Beth. I love her very much, and I probably always will. I don't want to destroy her or anything. I just can't have the lifestyle she wants. I don't want to share her, and I don't want to have sex with anyone. I'm a little worried about the kids. I know they're all grown up now, but I don't want her bringing all the Toms, Dicks, and Harrys into the house. While I don't think she's capable of that, I also didn't think she'd cheat on me," I explained. Sally spoke up, "Jerry, people go through this every day. We can do whatever you want to do. I take it you don't want the affair situation to go public for the sake of the kids. You have to support them, and we can determine the amount. You can give or take whatever you want. You're in charge here. We may have to use the affair as a weapon to settle things, but in the end, we'll come to irreconcilable differences. Is that all right with you?" "You are my lawyer. I'll take your advice," I replied. "You're getting a pretty big paycheck right now. Since she's working, we can probably get by with $500 a week in child support. And when the kids turn 18, kick back $50 a week. There will be no spousal support, and when all the kids turn 18, the money will stop. You will also be responsible for their medical care. As for higher education, it is up to you to decide if you want it. You are not legally required to. Your oldest is 17, and your youngest is 12, so you will have to pay child support for the next 6 years. Are you okay with that, or do you want something else?" Sally explained. "What about our savings and my retirement package?" I asked. "All savings will be divided equally, as well as any bills in both your names. You have 2 cars, so each of you can have one. Your pension is exactly that, a pension. We won't let her touch it. The house and the furniture are the only things left. What would you like to do with them?" Sally continued. "Our house is worth about $200,000, and we owe about $60,000, but my children live in it." "I don't know what to do," I said. "I have an idea I'd like to pitch to you. In many cases like yours, where you don't want revenge, but there are children, I suggest that she be allowed to live in the house until the children are grown and out of it, let's say at the age of 21. At that time, the house would be sold, and the money divided equally. Or one party could buy the house for half the value minus what is owed on it. She will be responsible for paying half the value of the house," Sally suggested. There was so much to go through. Why wasn't I enough for her? 18 damn years wasted, I muttered. What if Beth or Jeff wants to fight back? I asked. Then we'll pull out the big guns and tell them about the fraud. I'm sure they don't want that. And if they do, then we'll ask for custody and to split everything in half, and of course, no child support since she won't have any children, Sally assured. I took the next day off, and Sally called Jeff and said she had a proposal for him and Beth and asked if they could come to her office at noon. Of course, Jeff didn't want to go to Sally's office but agreed, knowing it was a win-win situation for him. Jeff and Beth showed up at the same time. I figured Jeff had told her to wait for him in the parking lot. We sat at the table, Sally and I on one side, Jeff and Beth on the other. Jeff spoke first. He knew Sally and wasn't happy to be on the opposite side. It's good to see you again, Sally. I know how you work and like to get to the point before you make us an offer. Beth would like to talk to Jerry alone, Jeff said. No, I said firmly. She told me everything tonight. I won't talk to her until after the papers are signed. Everyone here knows why I'm asking for a divorce. I looked directly at Beth. If you are afraid of your private life being exposed, please listen to my offer. I consider it very generous. Well, that question has been answered, Mrs. Cohen. Jerry has made you a very fair offer, Sally stated. She handed a copy to Beth and a copy to Jeff. He will cite irreconcilable differences as the reason for the divorce. As you can see, he has provided you with a decent income while your children live at home. The only point of contention is the house. I think Jerry was very fair in his offer here as well, Sally concluded. Jeff spoke again. We need time to study this document and think about a possible counteroffer, Sally. I'll talk to Beth and get back to you in the next couple of days, Jeff said. Just to be clear on this matter, there will be no counteroffer. If you refuse this offer, which I think would be very unreasonable, Mr. Cohen will file for adultery and claim custody of the children and the house. Beth lifted her head and cried. Sally was playing hard to get, and it hurt to see Beth crying. Beth grabbed the pen and asked where to sign without even reading it. That's when she cried for real. She was afraid of losing her children. Mrs. Cohen, please calm down, Sally replied. Jerry doesn't want to hurt you or the children. Please take a day or so, as Jeff suggested, and see if everything is satisfactory. We may have overlooked something. Forgive my threatening tone, but I wanted to make it clear that we are offering a very favorable arrangement. Jerry will make sure that you and your children are well taken care of, so please take this document and discuss it with your attorney, and Jeff and I will discuss it tomorrow. Sally handed Beth her box of tissues. Beth picked up a couple of tissues and looked at me while her tears subsided a little. Jerry, I really do love you, no matter what you think. I was just hoping that some time would pass between us and we could be together again. But I can see that you've already made up your mind. No, Beth, you made the decision for me. You want the freedom to do what you want, and I'm giving it to you. The only thing I ask is that you keep your lovers away from my children, or I will take them away from you. That's a promise, I stated firmly. Beth started crying again, hurrying out of the building. Jeff said goodbye and told Sally that he would probably see her tomorrow or the day after. Sally looked at me and said that it looked like I was going to win this case. I told her that there are no winners, only losers. I had lost the only woman I had ever loved, and my children were now living in a single-parent household. No, we didn't win, we just got a fair settlement. My daughter Amy took the younger two to my parents to see me. I was happy to see them. They kept asking questions, and I told them that their mom and I don't get along, don't agree on some important issues, and we're going to get divorced. I tried to explain to them that their mom and I will always be in their lives, we just won't be together. Darling, I'll be at your games, I won't miss them. And Carla, when volleyball season starts, I'll be cheering for you in the stands. I will always be a part of your life. I hugged and kissed them all while they told me how much they loved me. I gave them my cell phone number, and of course, they could always call me at Grandma's house. Brad showed up a little later. Dad, I have a question for you. Did you cheat on Mom? No, Brad, I would never cheat on your mother. Why are you asking me that? Jim, my high school buddy, and Travis, our neighbor, said their parents are divorced, and in both cases, their father was caught cheating on their mother. I was hoping you hadn't done something like that. God, I love you, Dad, and I'm going to miss you, Brad expressed. Brad, you won't miss me. I'm not leaving the country. I'll always be here for all of you kids. It's just going to take some time to get used to our situation, I assured him. Chapter 2. Well, the divorce was finalized, and I kept my promise to the kids. I went to most of their school events. At most of them, I saw Beth. She was a good mom, and if she had anything to do, she kept it to herself. I would like to point out that Beth and I have always been on good terms. We got together for our children's birthdays and other special occasions. Our only agreement was that she was not to mention her personal life to me. We talked about kids, holidays, my parents. No topic was off limits except her personal life. A couple of times, she would start saying something about a male friend or something like that, and I would get up and leave. The agreement that Sally and I drew up, we all signed. I wasn't there when Beth came to sign it. Sally told me that Beth took it very hard. We argued with Jeff several times about what credit cards would be paid and by whom. I guess it was his way of saving face. I told Sally that if it came to a fight, I would pay. We canceled all of our credit cards and made new ones in different names. I talked to the kids regularly. They told me that their mom had come to terms with the fact that we were divorced and seemed to be a little happier. I asked them if she was seeing anyone, and they said no, she went out with her friends about once a month. I think I shuddered when I heard that. I never got to have a heart-to-heart talk with Beth. She wanted the freedom to explore everything, and I didn't think so. You can't marry someone and decide to find new fun things to do. That's the way I was raised. Like I said, my parents were married for over 40 years. Perhaps we got married too soon, and she didn't have the chance to get what she seeks. I never explored the sexual realm either. I was happy with Beth. Going back a couple of years, I'll note that I started dating again. I dated a few women from work. At my age, most of the women I dated were divorced. I made it a rule to never date married women, even if they were separated. I guess I felt it inside of me. I had sex with a few of these women, but it wasn't the same for me. I mean, it was okay, and I treated them with respect, but I was always thinking about Beth. Funny how you can't just brush it off and move on with your life. I tried, believe me, I really tried. All the women I dated didn't suit me. The best days for me were family holidays when I could see Beth. One night last year, I went on a date with some guys from work. They said they knew a loud lounge where women hang out. Of course, you know who I saw there. It must have been ladies' night. I looked up, and there she was, sitting there. It was funny because there weren't any men around them yet. I didn't know any of the women she was with. The only one I'd met at her job was Barb, but she wasn't there. I approached Beth from the side so she wouldn't notice my appearance. "Would you like to dance?" I asked. "Jerry, what are you doing here?" she asked. "Just out with the guys." "Are you waiting for someone, or do you want to dance?" I replied. "No, yes. No, I'm not expecting anyone, and yes, I would love to dance with you. Let me introduce you to my friends." She listed half a dozen names and then said, "All of these women are members of our card club. About once every 6 months, we meet rather than play cards, and it just so happens that tonight we are just about to have a dance. How about a dance?" We went up to the dance floor, and I put my arm around her, just like old times. "Isn't it?" I said. She looked up and smiled, and I pulled her against me. We did 2 slow numbers in a row, and then the band started a fast one. "I've never been able to dance to songs like that," I said as I walked her to her table. She looked chagrined that I had taken her to the table. "Ladies, it was nice to meet you." "I better get back to my friends," I said. When I left, it didn't feel right. I didn't want to see if another man would approach her. I told my friends that it was time for me to leave, and "I'll see you later." As I walked out the door, I turned around and saw Beth looking at me. The next day, I got a call from her. She said she was happy to see me out and she enjoyed being around me. She asked if I would help organize Amy's wedding reception. My oldest daughter was getting married. It seemed like just yesterday that I had held her in my arms. Now she was ready to start a life with her boyfriend. It was funny that Beth called the day after I saw her because I knew Amy's wedding was still a year away. I told her I thought it was a little early since it was so far away. She said that reservations and such had to be made in advance. I suggested she call Amy and make arrangements with her. After all, it was her wedding. After they had put their ideas on paper, I would take care of the financial matters. She said that everything was fine and that she would call Amy and get started. I wanted Beth to know that one dance wasn't going to get us back together. I called her about a month later to ask how the plans were going. Carla picked up the phone and told me that Beth had gone out with friends. I was furious, but really had no right to be. We had been divorced for over 2.5 years. I asked Carla if her mom went out regularly, and she said about once a month. I called my buddy Pete and asked if he wanted to go to the lounge. He was also divorced and liked the ladies. We entered the hall, and it was full of people. I saw Beth sitting with a group of people, men and women. I decided to hell with her. I was going to find another woman to dance with. I saw a young girl in her early 30s. She was dressed very sexy, wearing a miniskirt and no bra. Pete said, "Damn, that's great. Check out these girls sitting alone." The girls were sitting with other women dressed about the same. They were only a couple of tables away from Beth and her friends. I was walking towards Beth's table when she noticed me. Her mouth dropped open. I walked past her table and headed towards the table with the sexy young chick. "Do you want to dance?" I asked her. "Sure, I like older men, especially handsome ones," she replied. I knew she'd said it loud enough for Beth to hear her. We stood up, and I pulled her against me. I didn't hold her hand, but I wrapped my arms around her and pressed her breasts against me. "I'm Jerry, and you're a very nice woman," I said. I was dancing almost in front of Beth's table. "I'm Rachel, and it's nice to meet you, Jerry," she replied. I held her close and tried not to look at Beth. The men at Beth's table were staring at Rachel's legs. I pulled her up so they had something to look at. The next song was a fast one, but Rachel and I stayed on the floor and danced. I knew it turned Beth on, since I had never danced fast songs with her. Another slow one followed, and I grabbed Rachel and pulled her tightly against me. I slid my hands down once and squeezed her buns. She just smiled at me. At the end of the song, I walked her back to my table and told her that maybe we could dance again later. Rachel replied, "I'd love to." Pete had just returned to our table as well. He was dancing with one of the girls who was sitting at the same table as Rachel. I was sipping my drink, and Pete looked up and said, "There's a pretty girl." He'd never met Beth, but she was the one who'd approached our table. "Will you dance with me?" she asked. I looked back at Pete as if she was talking to him. "Jerry, answer me." I stood up and said, "My pleasure." I looked at Pete and said, "Pete, meet Beth, my ex-wife." Pete's mouth dropped open as he remembered that he had just called her a broad. As we danced, Beth said, "What was that?" "She was all over you." "God, she would have had sex with you right there on the dance floor if you'd asked her to. Isn't that why we got divorced? Did you want me to make love to other women so you could have other men?" I asked, "Jerry, please, you and I never talked about this." I was wrong. "Look, Beth, you've come home and all you can say is I was wrong? Besides, we're not married now. When you were partying, you were my wife, damn it." Some guy approached Beth and me on the dance floor and asked Beth, "What are you doing?" "You're supposed to be my date." He asked. I looked at the weasel, and I said, "Back off, buddy. You're not getting anything from Beth today." I could see that this made Beth very uncomfortable. "What are you, her husband or something?" he asked. "Yes, I'm her husband, and you're going to the hospital if you don't get the hell away from us." Beth started to speak, but I interrupted her. Do you want to sit with me or go back to your boyfriend? Beth was beyond furious, pulled away from me, and went back to her table. I grabbed the creep's arm and told him that if he tried to have sex with her that night, I would hunt him down and hurt him. Then I let go of his arm, and he went back to his table. The two young women we had danced with earlier came over and sat with us. We moved to a booth and started having fun with them. Those girls had come here that night for one purpose. The little blonde I was with asked if we were ready to leave. She said she was hot and horny. I asked her to do me a favor first. I pointed to Beth, who was sitting there looking angrily in our direction, and asked her to come over and tell that woman that she would get her wish this evening. The little blonde smiled, walked over, handed Beth my words, and walked back. Beth was furious and tried to stand up, but found herself sandwiched between other people. By the time she got up, we had already left. We actually had sex with these two hot chicks at Pete's apartment. In fact, during the night, we even changed partners. The sex was great, but after they left the next morning, I didn't feel complete. I knew what was wrong. There wasn't enough love. I turned my phone off, and when I turned it back on, I had 10 messages from Beth. She was freaking out. She called me every name she could think of. In one of the messages, she said that I had ruined her evening, which pleased me. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning when I called her. She picked up, and I asked if she had calmed down. She started ranting again, talking about what a bastard I was and how much I had hurt her. Then, suddenly, she stopped. How does it feel, Beth, to know that the one you love is having fun with someone else? That's the life you've chosen. You sleep with whoever you want, and I'll sleep with whoever I want. To hell with love. As I hung up the phone, I heard her crying. I didn't hear from her for several weeks. Then one day, she called. Jerry, can we talk? I mean, about everything. I know it's going to hurt you because seeing you with that hurt me, and I know what I did was much worse. Beth, it's over. Go on with your life and have fun with whoever you want. I don't care anymore. I just wanted you to feel what it's like. Jerry, I haven't had sex with a man in 2.5 years. The last time was a month after you left me. It wasn't going well, and there was no love. I realized men just use me like I'm not Jerry. I was wrong. I was really wrong, and there's no way I can prove it to you. I wanted to try to explain it to you, but that's not the life for me. I realized it when Joe asked me if I was his little. I slapped him hard across the face. He wanted to hit me back, but I kicked him in the balls before he had a chance. I don't want that life, Jerry. I want the life we once had. Honestly, 2.5 years? What about that idiot a couple of weeks ago? He said he was your beau. He had every intention of getting you into bed. He was a friend of one of the guys at our table. The other men at the table were with their wives. Since I was the only single woman at the table, he decided he was going to be with me. I wasn't going to do anything but dance with him. Besides, he told me that you would kill him if he laid a finger on me. Is that what you told him? Of course. Should I carry out my threat? Hell no. He wouldn't even dance with me. I only came back to the table because you embarrassed me so badly, and then you sent that over to let me know you were going to have sex with her. Didn't you, Jerry? You had sex with her. Beth, we're not married. I'm free to do what I want. By the way, what happened to your friend Barb? I don't see her with you anymore. They're no longer in the club. She and her husband are divorced. The reason they tried switching was that they thought it would add some lust to their marriage. Her husband ended up divorcing her, and she and the other man's wife left together. 2 other marriages burned down. I thought it was strange that she mentioned the club. She said she hadn't gone there in years. I decided to change the subject. How are Amy's wedding plans coming along? You haven't told me anything about them, and now the wedding is only a few months away, I asked. I know you're aware of all the plans. Amy has talked to you a dozen times. I guessed you didn't want to be here alone with me, so we made the plans and just let you check them out. I'm not afraid to be alone with you, Beth, I said. Yeah, I don't believe you. If not afraid of me, then ask me out, she laughed. I don't think that's a good idea, Beth. It might give the wrong impression. People might think we're back together, I replied. I knew you were afraid. You still love me as much as I love you, you just don't want to admit it, she said. Beth, I love you, but the pain of what you did to me still hasn't subsided. I see it every time I look at you. When you cheated on me, you took most of my heart. I don't think it's recovered yet, and I don't know if it ever will. God, I'm so sorry, but there's nothing I can do. Nothing, Jerry. I'm the one who ruined our marriage. I lost the only man I ever loved. I also live with guilt on a daily basis. I think about killing myself every now and then, but the children will have to live with that. I've done enough damage to them. I had hoped that one day, maybe we would be together again. I didn't know what to think anymore. I had never spoken to her, and now I was hearing this. God, my mind was in turmoil. I wanted her, I loved her. I hated what she had done to me and our marriage. What if she continued with her thoughts? Maybe she's blaming me. I had to know more before I believed her. I knew I couldn't live with it if she killed herself. I thought I knew her well enough to know if she was lying to me, but now I didn't know. I had to find out for sure, but how? We all have thoughts like that from time to time. Thank God we don't follow through on them. I had to tell her something, but what? Beth, I'm starving. Would you like to join me at Red Lobster for lunch? We could discuss what to get Amy for her wedding. For the next 30 seconds, all I heard was crying. Then a tiny voice said, my pleasure. Beth, you have to realize this isn't for sex, it's lunch and a little talk about Amy's wedding. I understand, she smiled, almost inaudibly. I picked her up, and she was standing on the porch waiting. God, she was beautiful, dressed in a beautiful dress that showed off her wide legs. I stopped, and she almost jogged to the car. She got in the car and just smiled. We talked about general things, avoiding the heavy stuff. She told me she'd bought a dress for the wedding. She said, I'd better get my measurements for a tuxedo. I knew I would have to wear it, but I don't think any of the guys are looking forward to it. Without hesitation, I asked Beth if she would go with me to see how I looked in it. I hadn't worn it since our wedding almost 22 years ago. She looked surprised, and so did I. It just came out. I was so used to asking her opinion when we were married. Yes, I'd love to go with you. Just let me know when. I struggled to pull myself together and said that next Saturday would be fine. I would have to watch myself, I could get into trouble here. We were seated at a table, and we both ordered iced tea. We always ordered the same thing, we had so much in common. Beth, I need to ask you something, but I really need to know the truth. I promise that after your answer, we will never discuss this subject again. Have you seriously talked about killing yourself? She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Don't worry, I won't cry. I've cried enough in the last 3 years. To answer your question, I will say that I have. I told you that I went on a date once after you dumped me. I know it sounds really stupid, but I did it to get back at you, revenge against me. I don't understand. I was confused and felt abandoned by you. I know it wasn't your fault in any way, but I couldn't think rationally at that moment. So, I went out again to get even with you. I didn't like it at all, and then I got up to leave, and he called me his. I slapped him and kicked him and came home in tears. The kids had already gone to bed, and I felt like my life was over. I went into the house, got a whole vial of sleeping pills, and was about to take them when Carla asked if she could sleep with me. She said she needed me. I cried as I held the sleeping girl in my arms. Then I prayed to Almighty God for help. A calmness came over me, and I decided that my children needed me, and maybe you will see the change in my life and want me back. Tears came to my eyes. Luckily, our entree arrived, and we changed the subject and started eating. Afterwards, I asked her if she wanted to go to a movie. We found a good comedy so we could both laugh. I drove her home, and she asked if I wanted to come over. I said no, I had a lot to think about. Before I got out of the car, she leaned over and kissed me. I didn't stop her, she felt so good, like she belonged there. I love you, Jerry. Just remember that. She walked out without letting me say anything and went into the house. Something just didn't fit. She'd already told me twice that she'd made the switch, only another time, a month after I'd left her. I wanted to believe her, but the pieces of the puzzle weren't fitting together. First of all, if you go to a swap club, you have to have a partner. So who was her partner? It couldn't be this Joe guy since he was the one she had swapped places with. Where was her man when she was fighting off his pal Joe? Then possible suicide, she said over and over again, but she only told me about the sleeping pills. I wanted to believe her, but I needed answers. The biggest problem was where and with whom she had gone every month for 2.5 years. The kids never mentioned seeing anyone. Maybe she was being honest with me, and I was being paranoid. All of our free time was spent preparing for Amy's wedding. I had lunch with Beth, Amy, my son Brad, and Amy's fiancé Ben. We went to the tuxedo fitting. I swear I looked like a penguin, but Amy and Beth said I looked handsome. Time flew by so fast, and before I knew it, it was time for the wedding rehearsal. I went into the church and did everything they asked me to do. It wasn't a big deal. As Amy and I walked down the aisle, I did some silly things like jumping up and down, nothing bad, just having a little fun. I remember the pastor saying that the next day would be different. We might be nervous, so we should try to memorize our roles. I thought, yeah, walking down the aisle and then saying her mom and I, wow, I thought, who wouldn't be able to do that? Afterward, we all went to a restaurant and ate. I made sure to go because I didn't have to pay for it. Before I went home, Beth came up to me. I hardly spoke to her that night. Jerry, I'll see you tomorrow. There was something about the way she said it that made me lean over and kiss her. I don't know why, but I did. Maybe because of the joy over it, I can't say for sure. She smiled at me, and I pulled away. I got to the church early, just like I was told. The bridesmaids and the pastors were there. People were starting to arrive. I started to get a little worried. Beth was being escorted to the front row. She looked so beautiful. I had never seen her so radiant as she smiled at me. "How's my penguin doing?" she laughed. "He's scared to death. His daughter is getting married, and his wife has never looked so beautiful," I replied. I realized what I'd said after I'd said it. It was true. I'd never seen her more beautiful. "It's okay, sweetie, you'll be fine." "You'll do fine, just don't walk on Amy's dress," she smiled at me. I headed to the back of the church and waited for Amy. When I saw her walking beside me, I cried. She looked like a younger version of Beth. "It's okay, Dad, we can do this. Mom said to tell you that she loves you and not to step on my dress." It made me giggle. So much like her mother. I hoped with a slight shudder that Amy wouldn't look completely like her mother. My girl was getting married. The music started up, and the bridesmaids, flower girls, and everyone else took the stage. "Well, Dad, here we are," Amy said as we entered the sanctuary of the church. We started walking down the aisle, and I kept telling myself that I shouldn't step on Amy's dress. My eyes filled with tears as I led my little girl down the aisle. This was what life was all about: love, family, and friends. We got to the front of the church, and half the people had tears of joy in their eyes. Thank God I wasn't the only one who gave this woman in marriage. The pastor asked what was my line, me and Beth. "No, her mother and me," I said. I turned to sit next to Beth, and she was smiling and crying at the same time. I screwed up one stupid sentence, and I blew it. I whispered to Beth. "It's okay, honey, you're doing great," Beth whispered. All through the service, I held Beth's hand, probably to the point where she was in pain. She didn't say a word, just sat there smiling and crying. I was glad when the service was over. Then we stood around and took pictures and did everything else. Then it was time for the reception. I was craving a drink, so I went and got one for myself. Everyone was having a good time. Amy and Ben were a lovely couple. People said it was so nice to see Beth and me together. Every time I heard that, Beth just smiled without saying a word. The dance started, and they had the parents of the bride dance. I took Beth out on the floor and started dancing. People started clapping for us. I looked around at all of our kids, who were all smiling. I looked at Mom and Dad, and they both gave me a thumbs up. Everyone seemed to have confidence in us, except for me. After the wedding, Beth asked me if I would drive her home. Of course, I said. When we pulled up to the house, she asked if I would come in. The kids will be home soon, and I don't want them to get the wrong idea. They've already got the wrong idea. They went home with your mom and dad and will sleep in your bed. The only place you can sleep tonight is my bed or Brad's bed, Beth replied. Will you open the door for me? She smiled. I decided, to hell with it. She wanted me, and I decided to follow my heart. I wanted to make sure I didn't propose to her or anything. I still had too many unanswered questions. I went out and walked her to the door. I opened it, and she told me to come in. Jerry, you don't have to marry me today. Maybe that time will come, maybe it won't. I want you to make love to me tonight like you used to, she said. I walked in, and we both slowly undressed. She is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. She told me it was because I was looking through my love glasses. That night, we made love again and again. In the morning, we made love again, and then she made me breakfast. Jerry, I'm not going to push you or rush you, but I'll always be there for you for as long as it takes, she said. I smiled at Beth and walked out of the house. I didn't even kiss her goodbye. I wanted her to know that the sex had been great, but I wasn't ready yet. Now I had a new problem to think about. Beth was doing things to me that we had never done, and yet she had been without a lover for almost 3 years. Something was wrong, I knew it, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Everything was too good, too easy to put together. For over 2 years, Beth had never once mentioned getting back together. In the last year, she'd started throwing herself at me. I needed to know more. When I got back to Mom and Dad's house, everyone had already left. Dad asked me if everything was okay because I looked out of sorts. I explained to him that something was wrong, and I needed to find out what it was. Even though it was Sunday, I called Sally, my lawyer. I explained the situation, and she thought it was strange too. She advised me not to say anything for a few days. She has a private investigator who will find out what is going on. Beth called on Monday and invited me over for dinner. I told her I was busy and would take dinner some other time. I had some things to do. I didn't tell her that I was tortured by the thought of putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5. On Thursday, Sally called me at work and asked me to come to her office as soon as possible. She said it was very important. I asked for time off and went to Sally's office. When I got there, Sally told me what I didn't want to hear. I was right about Beth. She was in a swap club, and her partner was Jeff, her lawyer. Apparently, after I left, Jeff decided to take my place. Beth never decided to give up her lifestyle, but she kept it from me. I asked Sally why she had come back for me in the last year. She had her own freedom and her own life. Why bother me? It's all about money, Jerry. She's borrowed $100,000 in the last 3 years. Instead of $60,000, you owe $160,000, Sally said. How did she get it? Didn't she need my signature to borrow money against the house? I asked. No, when you settled on credit cards, one of them was a cash loan. You could borrow on it continuously up to a certain amount. Yours is almost up to that amount now. Your friend Jeff slipped past us. There was no way of knowing when you agreed to repay the loans. Sorry, Jerry, I should have followed up on that after the divorce. We don't usually do background checks unless we're asked, and Jeff certainly wasn't going to ask, Sally explained. When I spent the night with her, I checked the cabinets for the medications she was prescribed. There weren't any, so I called the doctor, and he told me that he had never written a prescription for sleeping pills in the last 3 years, and that Beth had been getting all her physicals. He said she actually comes in once every 3 months, not 6. I asked if she had asked to be tested for any sexually transmitted diseases, and he said she had been tested and was clean. Thank God for that, I thought. Thanks to the medical bills I was paying, at least I could figure it all out. Well, Sally, what do we do now? I asked. The only debt you incurred is the house. We'll put a lien on it for $40,000, and if she ever tries to sell it, you'll get that part of the equity. The rest is your loss. As for the children, 2 have already left home. The other 2 are old enough to decide if they want to live with your ex-wife, with you, or with your parents. We'll leave that up to them, Jerry. Since you told me you were moving out of state, you will probably be out of the loop. I'm sure they will want to finish the last years of their high school education here. Thanks for everything, Sally. I guess it's up to me now. Please call and put a lien on the equity in the house. If the kids decide to live with my mom and dad, I need you to transfer the child support payments to my parents, I said. I went home and talked to my mom and dad. I told them both that I could never go back to Beth, even though Dad already knew. I explained it as if he didn't know. Beth had been cheating on me, and I had hoped she had given up that lifestyle, but it hadn't happened. If she had been honest with me, we could have worked things out. I knew my parents were deeply hurt, but they needed to know the truth. I stopped by Beth's house while she was at work. I told the kids the truth right away. Their mom was cheating on me. I didn't tell them about the switch or anything like that. I tried to give her time to change, but she never did. I thought we had a chance at marriage, but I found out she was still lying to me. I could never live with her or trust her again. I just couldn't forgive anymore. Now I had to tell them I was leaving the state. They could come with me, stay with my mom, or live with my grandparents. Both of the younger children said they would stay with their mom, even if she had boyfriends. She never brought them into the house. Carla told me she never saw any strange men in the house. The only one who came to visit other than relatives was Jeff. They had known him for years. I didn't have the heart to tell them that Jeff was one of her lovers. They all cried, saying they would miss me, but I explained that I would only be 5 hours away if they needed me. They are also welcome to come and visit me anytime. When are you leaving? Dad asked Brad. Next week. As soon as I'm settled, I'll give you my address and phone number. I love you all and will help in any way I can, I said. I called Beth at work. It was something I've never done. Beth, meet me at the tavern. I need to talk to you away from the kids, I said. She said she'd be home from work in an hour and would be there. I know she must have thought her plan had worked and we would be together again. When she came in, I started our conversation. Beth, I've been doing a lot of thinking because of Amy's wedding and making love to you. Everyone thinks we're back together. It's all happening too fast for me. Do you know that no one knows why we got divorced in the first place? I look back on your life over the last 3 years. Where's the pain? The pain I felt when I found out you cheated on me. There wasn't any. Sure, your financial situation suffered a little bit, but nothing more than that, I said. She looked at me a little concerned. I continued. Our night together was the best night of our lives. You did things with me that we've never done before. I remembered that you always thought it was too dirty, but here you were doing it. It made me wonder where you learned that, I said. Jerry, I can explain that, she said. Here's what I need you to explain. You told me you hadn't been with anyone in 2.5 years. Why did you lie to me? You had bachelorette parties every month. It seems like the women you met at work and at the card club were also members of the swap club, so I guess you were having sex after all, I said. She started crying again. Because of you having sex with other men, we got divorced and you never stopped doing it. Go ahead and explain that. Go home and tell your kids why I left in the first place. They deserve to know and they're old enough to handle it. I've already talked to them, I said. Gee, Jerry, you didn't tell them about me, did you? She asked. It's always about you, isn't it, Beth? Never about your kids or me. I told them you were having an affair and cheating on me. Jerry, I'm so sorry you left me, and what could I do? I'm a woman, and I need to be loved. You don't need love. What I did last night was love. You need unlimited sex partners. Did you think I'd never find out? How the hell do you think I'm stupid? I thought, what if we got married and then I caught you cheating on me again? And then it hit me, your lover, Jeff, is behind the setup. Jeff, how did you find out about Jeff? She asked. Oh, God, what have I done? She said, crying. What have you done? You've ruined many lives, including your own. You have abandoned a man who truly loved you and was almost ready to come back to you. You have lost the respect of your children, even though they will still live with you. You have hurt them all deeply. You lie and cheat, and now you want to steal from me as well. The love I had for you is still there, but buried deep in my heart. A few years from now, I want you to think about what could have been. Your looks will fade, your children will be gone, and so will your money. I think you'll be left with a bunch of old friends and, of course, Jeff. I doubt he'll stay with the poor. She was already crying hard. Jerry, I really love you. Please stay with me, I'll go to therapy or whatever you want, she said. I turned to her and said, I forgot to tell you, I'm moving out of state and leaving next week. Thanks for the goodbye sex, you're really good in bed, but of course, you know that as well as God knows how many men. Goodbye, Beth, have a nice life. I knew Jeff was behind the setup. If I remarried, it would mean that I would adopt her lifestyle and our old prenup would be null and void. For the last year, she and Jeff have been playing me for money. She was already down $100,000 a month and back into debt, but she was living the same way she always had. That must mean she's racked up a hell of a lot of debt. What a stupid woman. I finally got to move on with my life. It hurt for a while, but I put it all behind me. Did I love Beth? Of course, I did, but her transgressions were too serious. A few years passed, and I met someone. She was a few years younger than me, beautiful, articulate, and fun. She told me she was divorced and had 2 children who were barely out of their teens. When I asked her what caused the divorce, she said a cheating husband who wanted the so-called good life, you know, the include other people's style. That wasn't for me. I'm a woman of the same type. I also have to think about what's best for my children. I told him to find a woman who thinks the same way, but that wasn't me. We dated for about a year, and I asked her to marry me. She looked up at me and asked what the marriage vows meant to me, to love, honor, and obey until death do us part, to be richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to make love only to her and no one else. I can do anything except obey, I laughed. She knew my story and about my alphabetic children, and she had to laugh too. You see, her son's name was Aaron, and her daughter's name was Faith. We got married, and all my children attended the wedding. At first, they didn't want to attend. I asked them to come up before the wedding, and they met my future wife face to face. They saw the kind and gentle person I saw. Of course, Amy and Brad were already married, and Carla was dating. Darl and Carr were still in college. They knew I needed someone in my life. Mom and Dad came to the wedding too. They too had fallen in love with my bride-to-be. They knew my life was getting back on track. My wife looked beautiful, petite, and sexy as hell. Why any man would want to share her was beyond comprehension. We went on a short honeymoon, and on the way back, we stopped by my mom and dad's house. I showed my new wife the town I was from and the house I lived in. Beth had to sell it because of debt. I got $30,000 for it, thanks to Sally, my lawyer. We came home and started a new life. It was a simple life, but we were happy with it. We enjoyed it to the fullest, and our lovemaking was amazing. We only had one problem, but we were able to work it out. You see, my new wife's name was Bethany. I remember her looking at me and saying we should do something about it. She didn't want me to call her Beth, so we decided to call her Sweetie. She told me that she didn't care what anyone else called her, but she didn't want to hear anything out of my mouth other than the word Sweetie. I remember asking if I could call her Sweetie sometimes. She smiled and replied, "That will be good too. When we make love, you can call me anything but Beth," she laughed. I don't know what Beth is doing. I cut her out of my life. The kids see her and say she lives in the apartment alone. They said she seems to be doing well. As far as dating, they think she is dating but doesn't really talk about it. They said she cried when she found out I was getting married. Of course, they love their mom and take care of her. She'll be fine, they said. I hope she hasn't given up on the wildlife. I guess I'll never know. I remember the last thing she said to me, "Jerry, I really love you, and I want you to know that I will wait for you. I know you will come back to me. I'll be here for as long as it takes." I answered her, "Eternity is a very long time to wait."